So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the need for higher education organizations to evaluate their transition path from using short-term scripts to a long-term plan of a modern identity and access management program. I want to take a moment to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to attend this webinar. Our goal here is to make this meaningful for you. So ideally, by joining today, you're in that position, or you're considering your current options around your identity and access management strategy. And so we're going to be going through the decision points, the areas of concern, the critical components to make these initiatives successful, and some of the things to potentially look to stay away from as well. So a little bit about me. My name is Timothy Till. I've been with Identity Automation for quite some time now, and while my role has been fairly varied over the years, it's been consistently focused on driving engagement in the education marketplace. So I work almost exclusively in the higher ed and K-12 verticals, helping those organizations move forward with an identity and access management strategy. And so what we want to focus on first is a little bit of a delineation here. So chances are, when you approach identity and access management, it's a point-in-time initiative. So I get asked fairly often by prospects and organizations in education, who's your biggest competitor in identity and access management? And of course, they're expecting some vendor, but the reality is my biggest competitor is Bob, right? So everybody's got that person or that team of people who over time have created scripts and custom programs to affect an identity and access management outcome for the university or the college. And so the first challenge that people have to approach when it comes to evaluating their initiative is that identity and access management needs, use cases, tools change. So have your business drivers, and your need to support that has changed as well. So the first step is to recognize that identity and access management is not something that an organization simply acquires and implements. It is something that needs to be ingrained in your day-to-day cybersecurity operations, and it has impact and benefit across all aspects of the university or college. So it has benefits at the student engagement side, and enrollment, and for your alumni, for your employees. It touches all aspects of the organization, and so it should be approached more like a foundational program than a point-in-time initiative. Chances are, if you're running on scripts or custom development, and you built those out, say more than 3 or 4 years ago, and you're evaluating, look, should I move to a solution, or should we just kind of band-aid what we have? The first thing you have to do is walk through what has changed, because chances are you did approach it as a project, right? So now you have to evaluate, your business processes, and that's not just around IT and governance, but that's around your student engagement, your enrollment policies and processes, sometimes even billing. All these things have to be looked at and brought into the identity management program, so that you have assurance that your program is going to bring value to the organization at large. Additionally, the type and number and backend architecture even of the applications and services that you deliver from IT have likely changed, and in some cases significantly. It's people have this cloud initiative move, and some of your applications may have been legacy on-prem, and now you may be looking to go more cloud for your solutions. And so some of your command line scripts or PowerShell may not be as beneficial as your application library changes over time. Additionally, your infrastructure could change, not just in terms of your physical infrastructure, in terms of your servers and where those reside, but additionally your political infrastructure. Right? Leaderships change, agendas move, And so your solution for identity and access management, needs to consider the political component of your organization as well. We work a lot with multi-institutional organizations. We do this in Norway and in California and other organizations like that, where you have a central service, but you may have different colleges or universities that consume from the consume separately, but consume from a central repository of some shared resources. And so, that political dynamic is important to consider as well. And then lastly, obviously your needs around governance and policies around data and data privacy, all of that can have an impact as well and should be considered moving forward. We're all aware of, top-down pushes and initiatives. GDPR comes into the mix. These things create a ever-changing and evolving field for which we have to build our identity and access management foundations. So another point to consider is how you support your legacy approaches to identity and access management. So, obviously, if you're doing this through custom development, a lot of the knowledge we find for the care and feeding and how these scripts and processes work is typically disjointed. It's not well documented. It would qualify itself as tribal knowledge. So if you lose those resources, so if Bob, wins the lottery, or takes a different position in another organization, there's normally just a complete vacuum in terms of how these things are being done before. Alternatively, you could have engaged with a vendor to help you custom develop. You've had significant investment in consultants and contractors potentially to build out your perfect, this is just like me because I'm a snowflake approach. And then that puts you in the position of making that difficult to modify. You may have better documentation, but there's no controlling over what language that was built in. It could be something that you don't have skill sets on hand to support. So you're going to find that those approaches make it difficult to modify the solution going forward. So as you look at the decision points, the costing of it all really boils down to how you support that today in terms of the resources and people you put behind it, or the budget that you allocate to outside consulting groups to help you grow and modify your custom approach. So we partner with a number of systems integrators in the marketplace, and in higher education, one of the leaders there is Moran Technology Consulting. And if any of you attend EDUCAUSE, I'm sure you've met probably Scott yourself at EDUCAUSE events over the years. But Scott Wyant at Moran, he leads their cybersecurity, their infrastructure and identity management practice at Moran. And we had an interview with him the other day, and it was really great to get his perspective because, at Identity Automation, we produce a product, right? We support that product, and we can even obviously implement that product for use cases. But when you get a consultant like Scott, who has done this as pretty much his entire career and has a specific focus in higher education, organizations like that can help you justify or help you make a case for switching to, from a custom script to a commercial off-the-shelf solution. And groups like his, Moran focuses on any number of identity management tool sets. I know for a fact that they've worked with, Fisher and Microsoft as well as our solution. And so they focus on the business foundational level. And so the great thing about taking that kind of an approach is it goes back to our very first slide where we talk about bringing in those business requirements as well and making an identity management solution bound to and adding value to your day-to-day operations and how you function as an organization. So kind of playing off Scott's point on this really is you have to build that case for success in the long term through functional level requirements gathering, business level, and then finally the technical level, right? So as we kind of break these out, the technical level is fairly easy by comparison. On the technical level, that's the evaluation of the requirements for this system is cloud hosted and it has an API So for us to integrate, we're going to have to do that through some RESTful or API-driven approach. And also this application supports SAML, this one supports CAS. So that technical statement of what's going to be required to be successful is fairly straightforward to gather requirements for. But the business and the functional level, typically our recommendation is that you partner with an organization that can help bridge those gaps. As we talked about before, politics is a part of this. And so you always want to make sure that you have an advocate that's able to bring in stakeholders from all the different lines of business so that you can determine whether or not those individuals need to be consulted in the process, whether they're responsible for the success or accountable for it, or whether or not they're there for the purposes of gaining or receiving information. But either way, all those people in the right way contribute to the business level and the functional level requirements for your solution. So the last thing you want to do is start a new initiative and just say, hey, we built all these scripts, we just want to do those things with something else that's easier to support. That's a missed opportunity because as we've already covered and justified, those scripts and those developed processes were built as a point in time a while ago, right? You may want some of the same outcomes, right? But how you get there and how you enrich those outcomes, that should be treated as starting ground zero with a programmatic approach instead of a point in time project-based approach. So that all kind of leads us back to that story, right? So let's talk a little bit about the differences between treating it as a project and a program. A project is, we have this fixed outcome. So for example, most people would approach moving from a scripted solution to a commercial off-the-shelf product as replication of what was there before. What you have to remember, though, is that the reason why your scripts are doing what they're doing is because you are working within the skill sets of an individual or a team and their capabilities. And oftentimes, the business process had to conform to those capabilities and skill sets. And you didn't achieve the right outcome that you could have achieved, if you were able to design this from the ground up with business, functional, as well as technical requirements. Taking a programmatic approach means that you move the solution. Don't think of it in terms of like project phases, right? Like if you're going to have a project phase, you have your assess and design, and maybe we'll say phase one is, hey, we're going to automate the management of our Active Directory accounts, right? And then phase two is we're going to manage, our cloud applications and start using SAML authentication. That's a phased approach in a project. The programmatic approach is inclusive of that, but it also means that you're revisiting the business, the functional, and where appropriate, the technical requirements to evolve the solution over time. And even better is where you can partner in casting vision down the line to know that, look, this is what we're going to be able to achieve with the solution. And then, as we look to do new initiatives around our cybersecurity strategy or around our access controls, we constantly revisit, that identity and access management foundation. So if you think about it, as organizations build out their cybersecurity strategy and manage that, everyone's focused on, the event detection, the perimeter, device security, all of those are critical components of that. But if you approach an identity and access management initiative as a program, you'll soon realize that at the heart of all of that is your identity-driven security controls. So if you build from there, and then you have these other services consumed from it, you have unified governance policies across all of your various disciplines. So at the end of the day, if you treat identity management as the central point, you'll build a more solid foundation, and you'll be able to move with change management easier starting with that foundation point. We've got about a few minutes left here, so let's go ahead and take it to some questions. The first question's around total cost of ownership for moving to a cost-driven commercial off-the-shelf system. A lot of that has to do with your current state, right? So if you're managing a solution today using custom scripts, that total cost of ownership is eaten up in a couple of ways. One, it's the resources internally that are dedicated to managing that, and then there's the soft costs around process change, that have to be factored into as well. And then obviously when you move on to a commercial solution, there's subscription costs with that, and typically that's inclusive of support. An important thing to consider too is that in any of these routes that you take with a commercial off-the-shelf solution, there's typically some consulting services that go with that. So your upfront costs on an identity management initiative is going to be higher than typically your ongoing costs. But I think your goal as an organization would be, you have access to training now, you have access to product documentation, you have access to your implementation and management documentation. So one of the first gaps from taking a scripted approach is mitigated by that. And then you have an evolving solution with ideally increasing capabilities over time, justifying your continued subscription to that service. And ideally, those systems are developed against your use cases and are attentive to customer introduced needs. So it's a fancy way of saying that your TCO may vary, right? It really depends on how much ownership you want of the solution. I would say that the more you own the solution internally, whichever solution you move forward with, the less your TCO is going to be, especially when you account for all the efficiencies that you're going to gain. The question around our higher education customer base, it depends on how you count it. So we have in the United States around 32 discrete college or university higher education customers. That's not including multi-site or multi-institutional organizations. We did recently secure a deal with Uninet in Norway, which manages the IT infrastructure and the backbone for all the higher education sector in Norway. So that technically adds another, as it moves forward, another 38 universities, but those are all in Norway as well. Well, if there are no other questions, I do want to thank everybody for taking the time out today. I'm sure we'll have a video of this available for you to download if you want to share this with your peers. And obviously, as things are in flux right now with travel and whatnot, I don't know if we'll be able to meet any of you at EDUCAUSE this year, or at least not physically, unless they go virtual with that event. But I do hope to see everybody there if it is happening. With that, thank you very much, and thank you for attending.